Hey guys, and welcome back to part 2 of the How to FPV series. And today we're going to be talking about setting your radio up with a simulator. And I'll talk about a couple different simulators. Mainly there are Liftoff and Velocidrone. The one I'm going to be using today is Velocidrone. I've tried others. There is another one called Freerider, and there are some free ones out there, but I suggest downloading Velocidrone because that's the one we're going to be working with, and that's the one I will show you how to set up and how to make it feel as realistic as possible. This is the one that I have had the best luck with, getting it to feel as realistic as this drone in real life. So that's the one we're going to be working with. We're going to be setting up the radio, and that is, from turning it on all the way going through to, setting up the sticks, calibrating everything, plugging it into the computer, and making sure everything is working. And then I'll also show you the settings that we're going to be using on Velocidrone to make it feel more realistic, because ultimately the stock settings do feel good, and I think a lot of simulators out there do feel pretty good, but at the end of the day, you want it to feel as realistic as possible, and you don't know what realistic feels like until you can fly the real thing. So I'm telling you from my personal perspective that I have spent hours setting this up to make it feel as real as possible, and I feel like I've gotten very close, as close as I possibly can, and that's what we're going to be using. So let's go ahead and get started. This is my personal opinion again, like how to get into FPV in a way that seems to be the most viable as far as less money out of your pocket, more experience, and ultimately a better overall experience with flying FPV, because you're going to be able to go from knowing nothing all the way to 100%, which is flying one of these with comfort and also confidence that you're not going to be going out and feeling scared like you're going to kill yourself or kill somebody else because you're flying this like flying chainsaw through the air and you don't know how to disarm it. So again, this is step 2. Again, this is the second video of our FPV series of how to get into FPV. And yeah, we're going to start out with what we purchased in the last video, which is a Q7X or QX7, whatever you want to call it. This is the bare bones budget model from FR Sky. It's called the Q7X, and it's around 107 bucks. Or QX7, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, this is the radio we're dealing with. You can buy other radios from FR Sky or Spectrum or Jetty or whatever you want, but this is the one we're going to be dealing with today. And again, this is kind of the bare bones budget model, but it can get you from 0 all the way to 100%, and a lot of even pro pilots use this radio, so don't feel like this radio is going to hold you back. This thing can do anything. You can fly planes with it, you can fly multi-rotors with it, you can drive cars with it, you can have a robot, you can do anything with this thing. So just don't feel like you're getting something that's only specified for one thing. It can fly everything. It can even fly one of these little guys, which I'm going to talk about in the next video. So, simulators. Let's get back to setting up our radio. Like I said, you probably want to go ahead and start downloading Velocidrone. I'll talk about that here in a little bit when we actually get on the computer. But first, we're going to turn on our radio and we're going to set it up so that it's perfectly calibrated, and our radio is ready so that we can plug it into the computer and get it going. So first of all, we're going to turn the radio on by holding down that center button. Make sure it's charged up. Obviously, you charge it up, use the owner's manual, figure out how to charge it up. I think it charges USB, not 100% sure. This is not the radio that I use on a regular basis. I use the X9D, which charges via a plug on the side. So when you turn it on, there's going to be a thing that says, switch warning, or if your throttle wasn't at 0, it'll say throttle warning. So for example, here in the United States and in most places in the world, there is something called Mode 2, which has throttle and rudder on the left, and it has aileron and elevator on the right. Now there are other modes out there. I suggest you Googling them if you are curious about them, or if your radio is set up differently and throttle's on the right, you're most likely going to be Mode 1, which means throttle is switched to the right side. I don't want to confuse anybody, but just in general, it should all work the same. It's just things are in different places. For most people, Mode 2 is going to be the standard. So again, throttle is on your left. You want to make sure throttle is down always, because ultimately it can lead to problems if your throttle's up. It's always going to warn you and say, hey, put your throttle down if it's not up, or if it's not down when you turn it on. So once you get going, you want to try to make sure all the switches are switched back, because that's just kind of the safe position that it wants. If you don't want to do that, you can hit exit and you will get to the main screen. Now the main screen on yours probably will say Model 1, but we're going to make a new model because we want to set up a model specifically for the simulator. So how we're going to do that is we're going to go on the home screen. You can hit exit a bunch of times if you feel like you're not on the home screen. Get to the home screen. You're going to hit this middle button between page and exit, and you're going to see this thing that says model select. You're going to scroll down to an open position. In this case, 7 is open for me. I'm going to hold down click the button on the right under the spinny wheel thing, and I'm going to say create model, again pushing down on the center button of that wheel. It says something about the SD, whatever, it doesn't matter. It made it. So anyways, we have a new model. It's called Model 7. What we're going to do is we're going to hit exit, and we're going to hit the middle button again, and then we're going to hit page, and then that will bring us to the setup page, okay? So we can name our model here if you want to go in here and just call it sim. I'll try to do that really quickly so that we can get going here, because I know this video is going to be a little longer than the average video. And so we got it named sim. You hit exit, it's highlighted again. We scroll backwards to the very bottom of the page. You can go this from the top if you want. We're going to find D16. We're going to click the middle button. We're going to make sure it's blinking. We're going to scroll to the left until it says off. And we're going to hit center there and then exit. So what that did is that turned off the internal transmitting module so that there's not actually anything being transmitted while we're playing a simulator, because we don't need anything to be transmitting while we're playing the simulator. So you go back to the main screen, and now we're going to do one thing that's pretty crucial, and a lot of people actually don't do this. We're going to calibrate the sticks on the radio. So how you're going to do that is you're going to go back to the home page, hitting exit a couple times, hold down that center button, and then you're going to see radio setup. Now you can set up the date, and you can set up the battery voltage range and all that stuff here if you want, but what we're going to do is we're going to hit page until you get to 9 of 9. Up in the right hand corner you'll see 9/9. It says calibration, and it says enter to start. I just go ahead and center the left stick as much as possible. I'm going to hit the center button on the right. It says set sticks to midpoint. What that means is you're going to set the throttle stick to its middle point. And what that actually means is to look at it and try to center it as much as possible visually from the top to make it adequate and very similar to the one on the right, because this other one is held by springs in center, and this other one on the left is only held in the spring from side to side motion but not up and down. So center it as much as you can from top to bottom, and then you're going to hit enter. And what that does is it starts the calibration. There's no timing involved, but you do need to do what it says next, which is move sticks and pots to their, because it just says move sticks and pots, but you want to move them to their farthest positions so that you get the maximum travel and maximum range on your sticks. And what that does is shows you the maximum travel, minimum travel, and it also shows you where the midpoints are. It shows the radio so that it can tell, you know, hey, when he's fully over here, he's fully over there, and it shows because you calibrated it correctly. So when we're done with that, we're just gonna set it back up. You can do the pots if you want. I don't ever do the pots because we don't use potentiometers for multi-rotors. Then it says move sticks, blah, 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 enter when done. So we move everything around, we're good, we hit enter, it's done. This radio is calibrated, it's calibrated for the sim, it's calibrated for everything, it calibrates as a whole, it doesn't just calibrate for that one model, so you don't need to do it every single time. So you're gonna hit exit, and you're gonna go back to your home screen. We have a home screen now, our thing's set up, internal module is off, we've calibrated the radio, we can set throttle back at 0. The next thing we're gonna need is we're gonna need a USB cable so that we can hook this radio up to the computer. So why would we need to hook it up to the computer? Well, you can do it wirelessly. I'm sure there is someone out there that's gonna comment and say, oh, well, they make a wireless trainer port, blah, 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 you can do all this. Well, this is the cheapest option, right? So we're gonna deal with a USB mini today. This is a USB mini cable, and a USB mini is kind of weird. It's the only thing I use it for is to charge my freaking electric toothbrush, but you know, I have one lying around, and yeah, I usually recommend them being 2 to 3 feet long so that you can get away from your computer. You don't have to sit right next to it with this short little cable trying to play on your simulator. So get, you know, one that's like 2 to 3, probably 3 feet long. This particular one has USB 3 or 3.1 on the left side, and it has mini USB on the right. It's not micro USB, not the one that your Android charges with, but the one that's bigger than that, that's between the typical USB and the micro. So this is mini USB, and that plugs into the bottom of the Q7X. If you have an X9D, which is the radio that I use, then it plugs in on the back, which is poor design because when you set it down, it ultimately has a USB thing sticking out of it and it can break off. The Q7X or QX7 has actually gotten a lot better, and it's on the bottom, but do be aware that these things are pretty fragile, so you can break it off. Just, you know, understand that things are fragile and you're dealing with something that's, you know, a little tiny piece of metal that has connections on the side of it. In my case, I know there's going to be some Mac haters out there. I have a MacBook Pro here. I'm dealing with USB-C, and I have a USB 3.1 or whatever, so I have to have a dongle. I'm sure you can find a USB-C to USB mini, but I don't have one, so I had to find a dongle. So we plug that into our computer. I'm going to go ahead and start a screen recording so you can see what I'm seeing. And then we're going to plug this into our radio. Now, you need to make sure that the radio is on when you plug in the USB, because if you plug in the USB and then you try to turn the radio on, it won't turn on. So you need to turn the radio on and then plug in the USB. So we've already done that. The radio's on. We're plugging in our USB. It says on the screen USB joystick or USB SD storage. I want to click USB joystick. We're good to go. The thing's hooked up to the computer. It's ready to go. It's being used as a joystick. Throttle's down. All switches are away from us. And we're getting to the computer where now we're going to go download Velocidrone. I'm assuming you guys have already downloaded it at this point, because I can't sit here and download it because this video would take forever. But I just go on, search Velocidrone on Google, and ultimately it leads me to Velocidrone FPV Racing Simulator, and I download it. There is another simulator called Liftoff, and I'll talk about that right now. That is actually under Steam. It's a Steam game, so if any of you guys are familiar with like Counter-Strike or something like that, you know of Steam. Steam has games on it. Obviously you can download Liftoff, which is on Steam. I downloaded it recently, the more recent version, because I talk to those guys fairly regularly, and I tried it. I didn't necessarily find it to feel as realistic as I'm used to on Velocidrone, but it did look more visually appealing. My computer can't really handle the highest setting of graphics, so you may take that into consideration when you're downloading certain games. You can degrade the graphics, but ultimately Liftoff is more of a game than it is a simulator. Now, I know that it's a good simulator, but it is more of a game. It looks more like a game, where Velocidrone is definitely more of a simulator than it is a game, but it does look very good. Now, there's other ones called Freerider, and there are other free ones out there. I do just suggest, if you want an easy turnkey situation, I'm not being paid by Velocidrone. I don't have any affiliation with it. It's just the one that I know, and that's the one that I'm suggesting. So 20 bucks, I guarantee you'll have a good experience with it. So anyways, I've downloaded Velocidrone. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. The drivers should work. This day and age, it's not like you have to go out and find all these weird drivers to get stuff to work anymore. It should just kind of work turnkey. But if you do have a problem, I'm sure if you Google Velocidrone or Tyrannus FR Sky driver for simulator, I'm sure you can find the drivers that you need. And I actually think that Velocidrone on their site has the drivers that you need to download to make this work. So we're going to go ahead and click play on the screen, and we're going to set this up. And yeah, so once we get all this stuff going, there are actually some settings that you'll need to put in aside from the stock settings on the simulator that will make this drone feel very intuitive and natural. Now, what I mean when I'm saying intuitive and natural is I want something that when I move my thumb in a natural way, like, hey, something's coming, and I just do it under natural reflexes, under muscle memory, that it does exactly what I want it to. If it's too sensitive, I might overcorrect and crash. If it's not sensitive enough, I might not have enough movement to get something to happen, and I might crash as well. So I want it to feel as natural and more like holistic, as far as your brain is not really thinking and you just do things. That's how I want it to feel. That's how I set up my real drones. So drone setup is a little bit different than plane setup, because you're not dealing with a physical surface that is directing air. You're dealing with speeding up and slowing down motors. So when you're talking about tuning a quadcopter, it's a little more involved. You have to understand, like, hey, I want this roll rate based on this amount of spin. Like, how fast does it spin at full deflection? When I add expo, it's all calculated stuff. It's not physical things moving air, and how fast those move determines how fast the quadcopter moves. It's very much all calculated stuff based on speeding up and slowing down motors. So not to get super technical on you, but that's just kind of the generic setup of quadcopters. It takes a little bit more like understanding of flying a quadcopter to be able to set it up, and it's kind of the catch-22 with PID tuning. You almost have to be a good pilot to understand how to PID tune, but you have to be able to PID tune to be able to be a good pilot. It's like, I don't know, it's a super gnarly catch-22, and I've been struggling with it since the beginning. But ultimately, I think I figured something out that works for me, and I'm going to try to share that with you guys. So once we get on here at Velocidrone, we're going to go to controller, and you can set it up through here. You just want to make sure that when you throttle up on the left and you yaw, that little quadcopter on the right there is doing exactly what you want it to do. If it's not fiddle around with that. If you have comments, I'll try to come to the comments and like help you guys out, but I'm pretty sure it should just work for you. Once you get in here, we're gonna go to single player. I'm gonna tell you the model that I use. So I've used all of these models, I've tried different things, and just so happens that this one called a Little Bastard always works for me and always feels the best. So that's the one that I use. I'm gonna select Little Bastard. I'm gonna go to, you know, countryside. Let's just go ahead and go to city. I would say for super advanced or super beginners, just go to countryside because it's very open. City works pretty well because it's actually pretty fun to fly in the city. And yeah, we don't worry about laps or anything, even though it says, you know, single lap, blah, blah, blah. Don't worry about it. We'll just click go. Once this thing loads, I'll show you the settings that you need. I actually have them screenshotted right here so I can bring them up, but I'll show you how to get to them, and I'll put links in the description so you can you can see those settings. So what you're gonna do once you're in here, you're gonna adjust two things first. You're going to adjust, and you can click this little guy right here. I don't know why I'm wheeling. Okay, here we go. So you can click this guy, the little question mark, and it tells you all of these things that you need to know to adjust certain things in this game. What you want to do is you want to adjust your field of view to around 107 degrees. Yeah, 107 degrees, and then you also want to adjust your camera angle to 25 degrees. And why I say that is because ultimately that's what we're going to be using on the real drone. The camera angle that I have is 25 degrees, and the camera field of view I have is around 107. It's a little different in real life. Like I think it's 120, but that's kind of what it equates to when you're flying in a game, is around a game in 107. So next we're going to want to go to advanced drone setup, and again, just take my word for it, put these settings in, you will be happy. If you really need to take down some of the settings to make it a little bit slower, a little slower to respond, you can take RC rate right here down to 1.5 on your aileron and roll, or your elevator and roll, sorry. So it's roll and pitch, whatever you want to call it. So you can take it down to 1.5. If you do that, I guarantee you'll be a lot more comfortable flying, but ultimately I feel like you should be at 1.92 because that's going to give you that reaction speed, and it's better to get used to something that's more sensitive and be more finesseful on the sticks than it is to get something where you're having to move this huge thing to get any kind of movement out of the drone. So we've gone ahead and set that up. Then the next thing, the last thing that we need to do is we need to change the quad settings. And again, this is something that, you know, comes from the factory a certain way as far as how these guys set it up, and I just always tweak it to get it to feel the way that I want it to feel. These are the settings that I set it to make it feel the way that I want it to feel. I've adjusted everything pretty much. I've adjusted propeller prop size and pitch. I've adjusted propeller power. I've adjusted prop wash and drag front, drag top, drag side. All this stuff I've adjusted slightly. Some of it I haven't. And I've also turned off battery emulation because we don't want to be worried about battery sag in a game. We're worried about getting stick time in, and we want it to be as consistent as possible. So when you're done with that, you're going to click OK, and you're going to make sure that everything is working correctly for you. You're going to make sure that your throttle is doing what it's needing to do, your yaw is doing what it's needing to do, and your pitch and roll are doing what they need to do, and yeah, you can crash into stuff and do whatever you want to do. So with that being said, we are pretty much done, actually. So that is setting up your radio and getting it linked into your computer. Now, in the next video, we're going to talk about actually buying something to fly for real, but I suggest flying this for at least a week, getting probably 1 hour a day. You know, I would say get about 6 to 7 hours of flight time, stick time, until you feel comfortable flying on this simulator, doing things where, you know, you can fly at anything you want to fly at, and avoid it, or, you know, go between something, figure it out, and just ultimately stick to flying on the sim so that you get more and more stick time, especially now in the winter. It's a lot easier to fly on the simulator and hit spacebar when you crash than it is to go out and crash into some snow and have to go find it. We'll talk about all of this stuff in future videos. The next video is going to be about this guy. This is actually the Acro B from Newbie Drones, and these things are pretty awesome. So we'll talk about, you know, buying your next drone. We'll talk about goggles and you know, what I think you guys possibly would want to buy to ultimately have a very good experience in FPV as a whole. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next video, which will be part 3 of how to FPV. Cheers.
What do we do it for? For the